Hey everybody, in this tutorial I'm going to be introducing you to the Indigo plugin for iClone's 6. So I'm going to be giving you kind of a brief overview as to what exactly Indigo is and how you can use it, some basic functionality. I'll be demonstrating that as well. But first of all, what you see on the screen right now, these are some renders that have been done by our user community. They are using iClone content and obviously rendering with Indigo, so you can see the exceptional quality of the lighting and everything like that. And Indigo is actually quite good at this because it utilizes a technology called ray tracing. Ray tracing basically generates an image by tracing the path of light through pixels in an image plane, just like you see here, and simulating the effects of its encounters with virtual objects. So it's kind of trying to simulate the natural behavior of light on particular objects. And the way that those objects react gets me to the next point of Indigo. It's actually a physically based renderer, which means that when the light hits particular objects, Indigo has certain shaders that have values that kind of dictate how the light reacts, whether it's absorbed or reflected off those objects, and that kind of creates the visuals that you see here. It's kind of simulating the natural behavior of light, as opposed to trying to create it using different material maps like iClone does. We have the normal maps, the displacement maps, and all that stuff. The lighting results in Indigo will be definitely a lot better than your renders will in iClone, and more accurate and more subtle as well. There's a lot of different things you can do. And in addition to that, Indigo is actually a photorealistic renderer as well. So that means you can, it's particularly adept at compositing models onto photorealistic backgrounds. You can adjust the lighting in different values to kind of simulate this, like this model is actually part of your photorealistic scene. That's how good the rendering is as well. So let's actually get right into it. I loaded up this project here in iClone. We have this sample project in our default folder. You can see we have a couple of little objects in our scene, and we're going to render this right away. The first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to show you how to render in Indigo. And all you need to do this is actually go up here into our toolbar, and we have this quick render button in Indigo. So I'm just going to click that, and that's going to launch up Indigo RT. And you can see here my scene is slowly coming to be, and this is the ray tracing working its magic right here. And you can see we have a nice render with some very accurate lighting. Although if I go back to iClone just briefly here, you'll notice that the iClone scene, the lighting is a little bit different. And this is because the shaders in Indigo and the shaders in iClone have slight differences, more than slight differences. But you'll be able to notice that the way that this one renders is a lot more overexposed. However, we can actually adjust that using settings like this tone mapping setting over here. This is one of the easiest ways to adjust it. You can take a look at your EV values, EV adjust values, your film ISO values, just like some photographers may be familiar with these values right here to adjust the appearance of your scene to prevent overexposure or underexposure. And there's also a number of different presets here, camera presets. Currently we're on DSCS 315. There's one up here that's called Gold 200 CD, which is very similar to what you'd expect to get from iClone. So if we go back to iClone here, you can see the color scheme is fairly similar, although this one in Indigo might even be a bit more saturated and colorful as well. So we'll just leave that for now, and let's go back to iClone. Now, in addition to rendering your whole scene with Indigo, you can actually just render individual objects. So if let's choose this cube maybe here. If I select this cube and I zoom in on it, I just want to render this cube by itself. I can just go up to here on the toolbar and go render selected object. And what that'll do is that'll launch another copy of Indigo RT here, and it'll render that object on a black background, and you can see the result here with the same lighting in the scene, but it's just rendering this object by itself. So that's really how you can just render individual objects, and it's just a quick example just to show you that. I'm just going to stop this right now and close down this window. Now, in addition, I can also save my Indigo project here, or rather my scene. I can just choose Export Scene As, and if I do that, you can see that I can save my scene as an IGS file, Indigo scene file. I can just call it something like test, and I'll just save it to my desktop for now. Go ahead and save that, and then I can just go maybe go back to my desktop here, and what I want to do is we see this test IGS file right here. It's fairly small. And there's a folder with test meshes and test images. This contains all the property, the data from my the things in my scene. And I can just go ahead and double click on that. And that'll launch Indigo RT again. You can see here we just have the scene. And of course I was focused on the cube at that point, so it's going to render the whole scene from that camera perspective that I had before when I saved it. So I'm just going to go ahead and stop this right now. In addition to that, if I want to save this to render at a more powerful computer, I can just go to File and Save Scene As. And here I can save it as a packed Indigo scene file or a PIGS file. And once I save it as a PIGS file, I can transfer it to another computer. It saves all the resources in this packed scene, and you can just transfer it from computer to computer, back and forth, and that's very useful if you want to cut down on render time. So I'm just going to cancel this for now, and I'm just going to close out of this one right here. Now, by the way, I wanted to mention as well that this computer is actually, the computer I'm using is actually not really that high end. It's actually just, if I go here to my computer and system properties, you can see I'm just running an i5 CPU here at 2.4 gigahertz there, and my video card is actually an NVIDIA GeForce GT540M, 2 gigabytes. So it's actually not a high-end computer by any means. It's a laptop, a middle-end laptop at that, and basically it's able to run this quite nicely, run the Indigo renderer quite nicely. So that's how you save your scene. Let's go back into iClone here. And what I'm going to do is load in another project, because before I mentioned that Indigo has its own shaders, and you can kind of adjust those values of the shaders to determine how the light reacts to your the individual items in your scene. So I'm going to load up this Indigo preset project right here. You can see we have a couple of squares, rather those hollow cubes again on the screen. If I click one of them, we go over to the materials, you can see that this actually there's no diffuse map on any of these cubes right here. If I go down into my material settings, you can see that all we've done is just adjust the diffuse color. So just to we can differentiate them in iClone. This one's blue, and they're all just like different colors, but none of them have any material maps. So what's this going to look like when I render it in Indigo? Let's find out, I guess. Let's just render the scene first of all, and we'll just wait for Indigo to pop up. And you can see now it's starting to render, and we're slowly starting to see the shapes of these cubes appear. And you can already notice that they have obviously different materials. If you pay attention to the ones on the left here, this one's a lot more shiny, and it's using a different shader than these ones. This one's kind of more like a plastic, whereas this one's more shiny metallic. And then we have some glass and icy type of materials right here. And the ones on the back there are kind of almost like clay, and we'll talk more about that in a bit. Let's go back into iClone to take a look at the settings, the Indigo settings. If you don't already have your Indigo window up like I do here, you can just go over here to Indigo settings, render settings, or you can go up here to plugins, iClone Indigo render, and you can have all these options up here if you can't find anything as well. So over here in the Indigo window, you can see I can just select one of these items here. Let's select the cube. We have this cube selected right here, and notice down here we have. I'm just going to expand this a little bit. We have a preset shader called Glossy Transparent, and if I go over here, we have a preset shader called Specular. And over here, there's one called Fung. And these are all different shaders. This one's an auto convert. This one's Orinaire. This one's really good for clay. We just have examples of what they're kind of used for. The diffuse is very good for more dull surfaces. And this one here is called Null, which means it won't show up at all. As you can see in our render back here, you may be noticing that one of them is actually missing. And that's because you can set objects as null if you don't want to render them. So let's go back into iClone here. So again, we will have a more detailed tutorial on all of these different shaders and the various values you can assign to them. I just wanted to kind of show you this project and give you a brief explanation as to the different shaders and how they appear in your Indigo render. So let's close this one down now, and let's just load up a project, a quick render with our boy Chuck. So I'm going to go over here to the avatars and G6 characters, rather not Chuck, Mason. Mason's the new guy for iClone 6. Chuck is the iClone 5 character. So let's just load in Mason right here. And I'm going to show you how to quickly render a character with a very nice looking result. Okay, so there's Mason loaded up. And let's just zoom in a little bit. I'm going to press Ctrl G to turn that grid to kind of see where we are here. Give us a bit of orientation as to where we are. So let's create a nice, artistic looking render with Mason here. Have him looking off into the distance or something like that. Now what I'm going to do is go to Indigo right here, and we already talked a little bit about the material editor, and all these values we'll talk about in a separate tutorial. But let's go down to the Indigo environment section right here. Now there's three types of lighting that you can use. There's iClone lights only, there's background color, and there's Indigo sun and sky. Now I'm just going to render with the Indigo sun and sky in this tutorial, and in order to do that, you need to make sure under iClone lights that you deactivate your iClone lights, otherwise those will be in the scene as well. Let's take a look at what happens right now if I only render with the iClone lights. I render, Mason's face just with the iClone lights. And we should have Mason's face appearing right there. So these are just the iClone lights, and you can see we have that black background. Yeah, kind of an interesting look right there. If I scroll my mouse button, I can zoom in and out. I can also pan around, by the way, using my left mouse key if I want to take a better look at that. So you can see there we have, Mason's render with Indigo, and you can see it already looks worlds better than it does in iClone. Let's go back to iClone here. You can see the huge difference between those two renders there. And what I'm going to do is just stop that for now, and I'm going to close this one down. I'm going to try and render with the Indigo sun and sky, and I'm going to deactivate my iClone lights here, and we're going to change this angle to something a little bit more romantic, maybe a sunset angle like that. And the direction that the sun is coming from is dictated by your world axis in iClone. So I'm going to go down to Mason's feet here, and you can see the red axis stands for the X. Red stands for the X-axis, green stands for the Y, Z for the blue. So if we want the axis to come from our negative Y-axis, we can just have it between the negative Y and the positive X. That would be somewhere between this area right here. So let's go ahead and do that. Have the nice, sunset shining on our buddy Mason's face here. So we have that Indigo sun and sky selected. We have this nice angle and the nice sunset selected. So let's go ahead and render this one and see how different it is from the previous iClone render. So you can see here that we get that nice kind of, romantic look, and the sunlight's obviously coming from this direction. You get a little bit of redness in the render, although the sky is blue. You can see the angle is fairly accurate coming from over here, and we can put that angle even further down if we wanted a more romantic angle. Let's go ahead and stop this one and put the angle even further down to something like barely above the horizon, and render that one and take a look at how that's different. There we go. So now you see a lot more warmth in that lighting there from the Indigo sun and sky. And this is often a very quick and easy preset to use. Just use the Indigo environmental lighting, especially if you're doing outdoor scenes. This is I'd highly recommend using this one. It's quite fast, and it's fairly accurate as far as in terms of lighting. So we'll just kind of leave this one rendering for now, and let's go back into this other project. We don't really need this one right now, but you can kind of see I'm rendering 3 separate projects right now on my poor little laptop, but you can see in more detail right now the kind of effects that the different shaders have. This one here was the icy one, and this one's more like a frosted glass. And here we have kind of a more transparent glass, and the painted metal or paint or plastic, whatever. And we have the very reflective metal over here, and then the clay and the diffuse over here as well. So you can see the different effects that different shaders in Indigo have on your different objects. Let's just stop this one and close it for now. Let's go take a look at the other one. I think the other one's still running as well. Yeah, so now we have a nice kind of clear render, and we got a nice everything's pretty clear in this one. We can just zoom in and pan around to take a look at everything, and you can see the very realistic rendering on the leaves and everything else as well. We'll talk a little bit about emissive lighting now. So I'm just going to close this one down, and let's go back to iClone. You can see this nice this render getting underway here. I'm going to go back to iClone here now, and we're going to talk a little bit about emissive lighting, which is a really cool feature with Indigo. This basically Indigo renders everything that's in your scene, whether it be a light or whether it be a camera or anything like that. And it also supports emissive lighting, which means you can pretty much turn any object into a light. So let's go over here and go into our props. Let's go into our 3D blocks. What I'm going to do is scroll down here until we find a regular just looking box here. I'm just going to double click that box, bring it into my scene. And you can kind of try and imagine this box as a light, as a scene light for your movie set or anything like that. I'm just going to scale it down a little bit, and then I'm going to just press the W hotkey and bring this directly above Mason, maybe something like here. That should be just fine. And now how do I turn this object into a light? Basically, let's go back into our Indigo settings with this plane selected into the Indigo settings, and I'm going to select none for iClone light only, but I currently don't have any iClone lights active, so if I render it right now in Indigo, it's going to be completely dark. So we need to change that. Let's, with this object selected, with this plane selected, let's go up here and go to base emission. We want to actually create some emission from this, some light emission from this object. I'm going to go ahead and bring it up to something like, I don't know, 14,000 or maybe even a little bit less. Let's find a nice angle here. And at first I want this light in the scene, so I want to kind of see what it looks like. Let's go ahead and render that right away. And what you should be able to see in just a moment is this light. This plane will be actually full of light, just a pure white light, and it'll be shining directly onto Mason right there. So you can see we get a nice, cool, almost kind of creepy looking result because it's the only light in the scene, and it's directly above him. So you can just zoom in a little bit and get that kind of look. And we're just at a couple seconds of rendering right now. So that's the kind of appearance you can get with emissive lighting. I'm going to actually stop this and go back, and I'm going to try a different angle here. Let's go maybe something like this. And what I want to do now is I want to add a little bit of color into my emission. So I'm going to boost this up a little bit to maybe close to 20,000, and I'm going to add a little bit of red into my scene, and a little tiny bit of green, and even less blue. And let's see what this looks like right here. We should have a very interesting render. So let's press render here. And our lighting should be mostly red, and maybe a little bit duller as well. You can see it's actually quite a bit duller. We can barely see Mason right now. That's because we've added in some color to our emission. Now let's stop this for now and kind of increase that level of emission maybe to something like 30,000. Maybe take that red a little bit down. And let's try this one more time. Or maybe even increase the amount of green and blue slightly as well. I want to keep it predominantly red though. So let's try and render this again. And with our base emission at 30,000, we should be getting some decent light on Mason's face. There we go. We get that nice, really, really creepy look. If you're on a very dark monitor, you might not be able to see this. But you can see it's a very interesting lighting result on his face, and very, very subtle lighting that you won't be able to achieve in any other sort of real-time render, especially iClone's render. So let's just stop this right now. One more try. We'll boost up the emission and try one more time, and then I'm going to keep this rendering because I really like this kind of creepy appearance. And now keep in mind as well, if you're doing this sort of emissive lighting, if you have a sphere is going to shoot light off in every direction. So the sphere is going to be a lot more heavy to render than a simple image plane would be, like a square. A cube will basically only shoot off light in 4 directions, or rather 6 directions, but the sphere will be shooting it off in like every single direction. So it's a lot heavier to render. And I really like this kind of dark, cool render we get with Mason right now. It's a very, very kind of creepy render. And put it directly above him, you can just barely see his eyes. So let's go back into iClone now, and I want to show you one more thing, and this is rendering with depth of field, which is pretty cool. Let's go ahead and delete this image plane right now. And what I'm going to put in place of that image plane is I'm going to plant some trees. We're going to go to our props here, into the trees. I'm going to go ahead and plant some Japanese maple trees. So I'm going to bring a nice green Japanese maple tree in here, and to my modify tab over here, and I'm going to start gardening. Let's make some trees, make a garden. Increase that size there. So we'll just have something like that. I'll have some trees in the background, and press escape, and I'm going to maybe plant some of these orange maple trees, the fall ones as well. Just so we can kind of mix it up, make it look a little bit beautiful, and we can scroll our mouse key to combine those right here. There we go. That should be nice. I'm going to press escape. Let's get a different angle here. I'm going to zoom out. Let's try and bring maybe Mason a little bit further forward. Need something about here. You can see my system's kind of slowing down a little bit, but that's okay. And I'm going to go to something like this angle. So you can be able to have like Mason kind of walking through the forest. And I don't know which angle that looks fine right there. And then I'm going to go to my camera settings. I can actually just use the U hotkey here, and that'll toggle from my props on my camera settings right here. And I can activate a depth of field, pick a target. Let's pick Mason. And the focus distance is pretty small, or the focus range rather. Let's go ahead and try and boost that up a bit, maybe to 1200. And I think that is maybe not even enough, 1500. There we go. So we barely see the the leaves in the background. That should be fine. Let's go ahead and maybe zoom in a little bit. I want to zoom in a little bit more, and we'll repick Mason as the focus there. And we'll bring this down a little bit, I think, 1200. There we go. This should be an interesting render in Indigo. So let's go ahead and try and render this scene right here. Oh, actually, we need to cancel this. We forgot to go into Indigo and change our lighting. Currently, we don't have any lights in the scene. It'll just render a black scene. So again, let's try that Indigo Sun and Sky, and let's try that nice romantic angle again, and try and render this. And we should have a nice looking depth of field effect with Mason in the Indigo render. Alright, so we've launched up Indigo here, and there we go. We are starting to make that, starting to see the result of our render. Let's go over to the other Indigo renders and see how they're doing. You can see this one's a very nice looking creepy render. I really like this kind of style. We'll just stop this one for now, just to conserve our resources a little bit. And this one over here, that's the romantic sunset on top of a mountain look right there for Mason. We can go ahead and stop this one as well. And I think this one is our original. Nope, this one. One more. There we go. So here we have our nice view right here with the nice multicolored trees in the background, and Mason just sort of looking off into the distance. You're probably wondering why I always use this profile of Mason. I don't know, I just think it looks nice. And he renders a lot better, obviously, in iClone, or rather in Indigo, than he does in iClone. So you can see the nice sky in the background, the combination of the leaf colors and everything like that. So this is basically, a minute of rendering in Indigo on an i5 laptop. And if you're using another, higher-end desktop or something like that, it's even a lot faster than this, or, even a render farm is just absolutely fast. But basically, this is the kind of results you can get really quickly in Indigo with just a couple of adjustments. And if I wanted to, again, I can, adjust that film ISO and increase the, the light on Mason's face, increase the exposure on his face right there, or make it more romantic and dark by, decreasing that ISO. And let's try that Kodak render. Again, we can use this one. Where is it? There we go. The Gold 200. I like the colors in this one right here. We can see that we get a very nice look right there as well. So that's basically it. Let's go back to iClone here. Or let's go to that nice dark red render. It is this one here. So that's basically it for our introduction to Indigo tutorial. I just kind of wanted to show you some of the basic functionality. And don't be worried if you don't really understand everything yet. We do have a series of tutorials on each individual feature. But mostly it's kind of just messing around with different values and kind of getting the results that you want. I'd encourage you to check out our tutorial series though, to kind of get a more in-depth knowledge about what exactly Indigo is capable of. And again, it's a really awesome combination, just setting up your scene in iClone, your characters, and utilizing your regular iClone resources and just rendering them in Indigo so they look 10 times nicer, like you see here. So again, that's about it, guys. Thanks for watching, and hopefully you enjoy using your Indigo plugin.